Hey, and thanks again for listening to my podcast. Now, I did want to take a second here, and this is super exciting for me because I have my first sponsor, and that is Anchor.fm. Anchor is the platform I use to host my podcast. They're super easy to use, and you can sign up in less than 5 minutes. And I hate signing up for stuff. That's actually why I went with them. Now, here's the other thing. All you have to do is upload your recording, or you can record right in their website or their app for free, and they'll post it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and really anywhere people listen to podcasts. And the best thing about it is they are 100% free. Seriously, I haven't paid a penny. I don't know how they make money. It's all free. Haven't paid anything. It's awesome. I highly suggest you try out Anchor.fm if you want to start a podcast. You can get it right on their app, or you can go to their website. So once again, download their free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. This is the Real Estate Marketing Podcast, where we teach you how to grow your real estate business. Whether you're a wholesaler, investor, or realtor, this podcast is for you. Hey, and thanks for coming back to the Real Estate Marketing Podcast. I'm Austin Glanzer, and this week Adam is actually out of town. He's on vacation, hanging out with his family. For those of you who have listened before, he did just sell his business, so he's very much taking some time off, so good for him. But I am very excited for this episode because we are bringing on Paul Thompson and Cody Dover. These guys are awesome with what they are doing out in Arkansas with buying and selling homes, getting creative when it comes to deals. They're doing multiple contracts a month. I know that for sure. Paul has actually been on BiggerPockets, and before I even got to know him, I listened to his episode, and it was super, super valuable to me. So I'm going to link that in the show notes, his episode that he was on with BiggerPockets. He's got a bunch of other stuff going on. He's the host of Ready Investor One, and Cody is just killing it with the acquisitions management of, is it Little Rock Home Buyers, Cody?
Little Rock Property Buyers.
Little Rock Property Buyers. I wanted to make sure I got that right. So anyways, enough of me, but Paul and Cody, can you guys say hi?
Thanks for having us.
Hey, that was a perfect intro. Thanks, Austin.
Hey, I do my best to try to nail it first try. So
well, that was awesome.
Why don't you guys say a little bit more about yourselves? How about we start with Paul?
Sure thing. So I'm a full-time real estate investor based out of Little Rock, Arkansas is where I live and invest. And I used to work in the corporate world, and I used real estate as my vehicle as a way to escape the rat race.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Cody?
Yeah, and Sam, I'm down here in Little Rock, and, we're partners with Paul and teamed up this first part of the year. And what I do is more the deal acquisition side of the wholesale and just the business itself. So we've been doing this for about 3 years now, and 26 years old and full-time in it. So
yeah, super cool. And that's awesome. You're already doing all this after just only 3 years. So Paul, could you talk a little bit about just like being on BiggerPockets and tell us a little bit about what that episode is about? I think some people will probably jump back and listen to that if they haven't.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. When I first started about 5 years ago, I was at the time about, 37, 38. And I was just like probably most of you who are listening to this, you're relatively new in real estate and was wanting to learn. And BiggerPockets played a really big role in me getting started and as just a foundation of understanding. So I really recommend any sort of if you're looking for a resource, it's hard to beat BiggerPockets. And it was a great pleasure to get the opportunity to be on that. And typically the way people get on that podcast is they apply and they there's this whole process to get there because they are the 800-pound gorilla in the market. However, I stumbled into the opportunity of meeting David Green, who is currently one of the co-hosts, and at a conference, and we got to know each other pretty well. We actually did a deal here in Arkansas together, did a couple of deals here in Arkansas, in fact. And as a result of that, we got to know each other a lot better. And he said, you from what I'm hearing or what you're doing, you really need to come on here. Go ahead and apply, and I'll make sure you get on there. And so he basically was my champion to the people who you pitch who they're going to get on there because they carefully select. So that was a great opportunity. I was kind of able to sneak past the line effectively, and it was a very actionable episode because I think a lot of people, they hear the stories of real estate and they always power it, but the advice that I often hear on podcasts is really short on mechanics and tactics. And so I try to really break it down on how I used real estate and how I found deals. And it's one of the most downloaded episodes according to BiggerPockets. And in large part, I think that's because I made it a point to not gloss over the details, but to really break it down so that somebody who is new can get started and find some deals quickly.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm not kidding either. I definitely remember your episode. It's up there within like the top 5 episodes that I remember. And I know we did a webinar a little while ago, and I was like, oh, this is like the same episode I listened to, and I'm talking to the guy. So that was really cool. Can you tell us a little bit, like, how did it help you in real estate going on the show? Did you get a lot of people reaching out to you? Like, what was the aftermath of being on BiggerPockets?
That's a good question. There is a lot of notoriety that comes from being behind a microphone in a large audience. That's just the way it works. And in this case, it was a video podcast as well. So people saw my face and they heard my voice, and people naturally you resonate to people that you hear. And so, yes, I did get a lot of notoriety, so to speak, from that episode, which was incredibly helpful when I was doing my own podcast. So a lot of people came to my podcast as a result of hearing me on BiggerPockets. So that helped upgrade my status, so to speak, in a podcast and include significantly improves the downloads that I got. But more importantly, behind all that is I am not as big as BiggerPockets, so I can still take the time to talk to people who actually want to talk to me. So I routinely speak with investors who are trying to get started or want to invest, and they don't know how. And that's something that I very much like to do, is to talk to investors and just break it down. Like, what is your challenge? There is something in your way. What can we knock over and start solving right now?
Yeah, that's awesome. And, just with you coming on this podcast too, I'm sure it's going to be just as big as BiggerPockets outreach and stuff. So just be aware. Your email is probably going to blow up. Yeah, well, that's awesome. I was actually just personally curious in that, what the aftermath is. So that's all. Thanks for sharing that. Cody, can you talk a little bit about how you got into real estate? You're young like me, been in it for 3 years. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, yeah, what's crazy is I didn't know what I wanted to do after I got out of college 3 years ago. And, my one of my friends had invited me to this course, and it was a Rich Dad Poor Dad course. And it was free, so I had nothing to lose. And I didn't know anything about real estate at the time. I didn't even know I wanted to get into it. But for some reason, this course kind of sold me on the idea of being, working for yourself and being involved in real estate. And so from there, I bought into the weekend course, and which was their upsell. And then I bought into the main course. And from that point moving forward, I had paid too much money to start out with that I had to make something work. And so just by going through the obstacles and just the course itself, I was quickly able to see that this is the right thing that I should be doing. And I should not be, I don't need to be working a full-time job for 40 years, like kind of like my parents were doing. And just the whole, the gist of the society and how they think, this was certainly different.
So people are probably maybe a little confused. Like, what's the connection between you two?
Well, funny thing is, in each state, there's a national RIA association, like a real estate investors club. And when I was first starting out, I went there to network and learn, and Paul happened to be a speaker there. And so me being the curious George that I was, my partner and I at the time, Chris, we would go up to Paul like he was just the authority figure in that room, because essentially we all naturally tend to think that, if you're on stage speaking, you know what you're talking about. And so we tend to, gravitate towards Paul, and we just kind of kept up over the years. And finally, 2 or 3 years later down the road, we decided to, join forces.
Okay, so that's a really, really cool story. I love that. And if you're listening to this and you're younger, you're in your 20s and you go to seminars or courses, take that advice that Cody just gave and talk to the speaker, ask questions, because you never know. A couple years later, you could be on a podcast with that speaker. So
and partners with them.
Yeah,
and partners.
And I'd like to follow up on that because a lot of people do that advice and they go and talk to the speaker, but Chris and Cody, who is our other business partner, Chris, these guys, they were different than most of the other people that came by and asked questions. They had clearly done their homework beforehand. They had read books. They had listened to podcasts, and the quality of the questions that they were asking were far superior than some looky-loo who's just curious about real estate. And they made it a point to follow up and continue the relationship. Cody is a master at this. He goes to conference and he gets a hold of someone's contact information and he hangs on to it and he follows up and does an email, does a text, and he forges a relationship. He is better at that than probably anybody I've seen. And I like to go to conferences with Cody because he is so much better at that than me. He can go do all that part because I'm naturally not a outgoing personality. One of the reasons why you hear about me on a stage is because that's how I get to know people, because I'm not going to go own the room by just being a strong personality. I have to know what I'm talking about and get on stage so people come to me afterwards. So you do what works best for you, but use this example that Cody has exemplified here as an example of what you can do and set yourself apart. Don't just be the young kid that is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed but has done no homework.
Yeah, that is great advice. And Cody, good work on following up. That was motivating for me too, because I think I'm pretty good at conferences, like talking with people, but my follow up is not there. So definitely follow up whenever you talk to the speaker, because seriously, you could become partners with them. That's awesome. So I guess we should talk about why you guys are on this podcast, right? So you guys partnered, you guys are doing wholesaling, you're buying and holding. Can you tell about what you're doing currently in your business?
So I'll start, and maybe I think Cody could add a little to that. So the reason we got together is I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing it for 5 years. I was able to quit my job, and I have gone and looked at a lot of houses, and I am pretty good at talking to a motivated seller on the phone. So I've kind of learned that strategy and that tactic, but I am not coded to do that. I mean, that sucks my life energy out of me to do that. But it makes money. But Cody, on the other hand, is a natural at it. And he's very smooth on the phone. He likes to negotiate. He's very good at getting to talk to people. And so is Chris. And so we went to a conference together that I invited these guys to because they're just hungry guys and they both quit their jobs to make real estate work. And I said, well, hey, come to this conference with me. I'm a member of this mastermind. Come join. And while we were at that conference, we decided, instead of us competing with each other in Little Rock, let's join forces and become better than the sum of our parts. And so in Little Rock, our motive is to get contracts, is to get deals. And then we decide how to monetize it. Sometimes we wholesale, sometimes we keep them, sometimes we do a buy and hold, sometimes we flip. And we just adjust to our current situation, and then we adjust to what the market is. During COVID, the market largely shut down for about 2 months. But then, for reasons that are interesting to talk about, the real estate market completely exploded afterwards, and now it's become this really hot market with a ton of demand. People are changing the way they're living, and that is an opportunity for us. And so we are trying to make hay while the sun is shining.
So can we talk a little bit, just maybe 1 minute? Why do you think the market has exploded after COVID?
Well, let's think about what's happened in the market and what's happened in the world. So fundamentally, the way we live and work has changed and probably has changed for the rest of our lifetimes. So COVID is a before and after event. We will look back on 2020 as the year of COVID-19, and it was life before and life afterwards. And right now, people don't want to live in an apartment all clustered together. They want to go to an apartment or go to a single family house, stretch out. They want a office where they can work from home, or maybe their kids are having to do Zoom classes. Maybe they can't go to the gym like they used to, and they want to have a home gym. So having more space, more places to stretch out inside of your single family house is what more and more people want. And the people who are doing that right now are the people who have access to credit. So the fixer upper type houses aren't selling very well. It's the houses that are perfectly rehabbed and are ready to sell at a moment's notice. These properties are flying off the market in almost every market condition in every market across the country because interest rates are low and the fundamental way people are living has changed.
That is exactly what we're seeing in our market too. Like the houses that are high end are selling so fast, it's ridiculous. And then the ones that are kind of like okay are a little bit slower. And I thought that was interesting. So you depicted that perfectly. So I want to jump back a little bit. Cody, I didn't give you a chance to even talk about your business. So can you kind of talk from your perspective, like getting the contracts, right? So Paul said your job is to get contracts and then decide what to do after. So like, tell us a little bit about your job.
Yeah, so it's just filling up the pipeline and your marketing funnel. And if you look at it, like if you have a funnel on a piece of paper, you see at the top there's a wide opening, and so we have to drum up as many prospects through that top as we can, and in exchange for some leads down the bottom of the funnel to procure later on. So what we do is we do marketing, and that's kind of partly why we're on this call is through some of the marketing efforts that we do with Josh and the PPC and SEO work for the inbound. But for outbound, that looks like us pulling the list, smiling and dialing. We're giving these sellers a call to a point to now where we hired a sales team to call for us to where we only talk to the motivated people. And what that looks like is just continually to follow up with them, talk to them in a way where you're building rapport, you're building, more that trust, that know, like, and trust factor so that somebody can do business with you. And a lot of mistake I see in people is they don't follow up. And one thing that we excel at is the whole follow up. So that's kind of partly where we kind of separate ourselves from a lot of other competitors is the way we talk and the way we are with the sellers and who we're, how we're communicating with them. So part of my day just looks like calling, following up, and then sometimes I go on property visits. And then other times I'll go meet the seller there at the property to maybe just turn my charm on because I know I can win that battle if I can just get in person with them and we're, 10, 15,000 off.
Yeah. How do you turn that charm on?
It's just your beingness. It's your relatability and your nurturing and how you talk and communicate to to another human being. And that's not easily taught, but we are trained competitively by a coach, and we are trained to negotiate and speak and communicate well. And that's something that is, it just comes natural somewhat to us is really communicating effectively. It's just doing a takeaway. We don't have to get this property from you. We don't have to buy it. But if we do, I want it to make sense for both of us, or it's not going to make sense at all. And it's just the way that you go about your conversation. And also just being direct with them on the phone. A lot of times people don't know who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. What matters is, can you help them, and are you able to provide a solution to their problem?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know this is an audio only podcast, but for those of you who don't know what Cody looks like, I mean, he's a real charmer. So, so it's easy. It's easy for him. Anyways, so I do want to harp here for a couple minutes. You said, you buy lists, you've hired a sales team. Like, I know you guys are doing stuff with website because, my business partner, Josh, he really owns that for you guys. So talk about like what lists, people might be like, okay, a list, where do you get lists?
Yeah, there's just different services out there. You got ListSource and PropStream and other companies like that who pull massive data. And all it is, you can break it down by neighborhood and go after specific homes and pull the list and skip trace them. And that'll allow you to give the number of the property owner for you to then call that number. But we're trying to do 10,000 prospects a week. So we don't have the capacity to dial 10,000 calls a week. So we outsource that to another team to do that for us. But as far as the list goes, like we use PropStream. It's not a bad tool software to use and go and pull your list. but anybody can go pull that same list. It's all in the follow-up and your beingness and how you communicate with that person is how you win the deal, because you and I can go, both pull the same list, PropStream. So it's not really more in the list as it is in the communication.
So you pay for this program, PropStream. I want to just dumb this down a little bit because I think it'd be important for people to understand. So you go to PropStream, you pull a list of just all properties in a certain neighborhood, or do you how defined do you make it? Do you make it like all 3-bed, 2-bath properties, 1,500 square feet to 2,000 square feet? How do you do that?
Right. So what I'll try to find is what our buyers are looking for. And I'll try to align with more premium buyers and see what it is that they're looking for and reverse engineer that. Okay, they're looking in this zip code. So I'm going to go pull just this zip code. And maybe I'm going to pull a 3-bed, 2-bath, but no more than, 2,000 square feet, no less than 900. So I have my window there. Mm-hmm. And I know some buyers don't buy anything, under 1950 built. So you can put that filter on. So you can filter it however you need to based on the current demand. And so it's all different. There's no one right way to do it. It's just go out there and do it and see where you stand.
Okay. And then you hire a sales team. So what's that process look like? Are they texting people? Are they calling them, emailing them? How do they reach out?
So initially we'll skip trace the list, say we have 10,000 people to call. We'll just dump that list to them to call, and it's a calling center. And currently we have 2 callers working for us full time. And so they're going through the list, drumming up leads. And all the while they pump out, if we give them 10,000, we may get 200. And then out of that 200, we then follow up with them and talk with them and nurture that relationship to the end.
And I think it's probably also important to clarify like the funnel. So if you're listening to this, like when we're talking about funnels and leads and deals and contracts, what's the hierarchy? So we like clearly defined what we consider a lead. A lead is anybody who has said, yes, I want to sell my house in the next 6 months. That is a lead. Anybody before that is a prospect. So he talks about this list of 10,000. Those are all prospects. They just own a house. So now we have to reach out and say, hey, do you want to sell your house? If they say yes, then that's a lead. Now that is a huge, it might be a 10,000 to 200 ratio before we actually get somebody who says, yes, I want to sell my house. Then that's the lead that we want to go and get a contract on. And that's part of the sales process. But before we even get into the sales process, before Chris and Cody ever talk to one of these potential motivated sellers, we've had somebody else talk to them and kind of basically the way we refer to it as, did they raise their hand? Did they say, yes, I want to sell my house?
Okay. No, that's great. So you have the sales team that are calling the prospects, or just people who own houses, you're saying. Right. So did you have to train them, or is it like a service that's what they do?
Well, initially it is a service and they do work with other investors. So they have the script down and stuff, but I'm not a script person, and I make it be known that I want you to use your intuition and I want you to be able to think. And I tell them the context and let them, I set it up to let them be known that they're the opener. They're opening the conversation. They're not trying to negotiate or walk the seller down a certain path. They're simply saying, are you selling or are you not?
Okay. So that's really awesome that you have that clearly defined. Having it defined, I think, is so important. So you got the prospects, then you got the leads, and the leads have already been talked to by your sales team that you hired. So then from there, you are personally talking to them and scheduling a visit to go. And that's when you got to turn your charm on. Is that what you're saying? I want to make sure I'm processing this correctly.
Yeah, I don't really waste my time on a lot of property visits unless I'm close or if I need to go turn the charm on. A lot of people would waste too much time doing that when they're nowhere close. Negotiate over the phone, or at least get them into a ballpark window that somewhat works for you, to where if you go out, you can get them down another 5,000 or whatever it may be. But you've got to wait until you got them in that window, or if you simply just want to, kind of build that trust factor with them.
How do you know what the property condition is like? Do you have them send photos to you, like over text?
So it's all through communication and kind of probing questions. So going
Okay.
back to what Paul had mentioned earlier in the networking, as you know, we always came with quality questions, and that's the same with sellers. You've got to probe the right question out of them and use more of an interrogative, verb led approach to where it's not a yes or no answer.
Okay. Can you give an example maybe of like what those type of questions would be?
Well, so like instead of asking, is this price negotiable, which most people will ask, well, you can either say yes or no. Well, instead of saying that, I said, okay, well, what did you need? Okay, I need 50,000. Well, now is that 50,000? Is that what you need, or is that what you want? And then just kind of probing them a little bit more instead of, okay, well, is this negotiable or is it not?
How did you come to that number? Like you use what and how questions instead of you create scenarios where they can say yes or no, because yes or no questions in the conversation, you want them to start talking. And when they start talking, they end up oftentimes negotiating with themselves.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what I do is I'll let them work themselves down before I even shoot out a number. I'm really reserved on a number that's, I already know the number in my head, but I do not let it be known until it needs to be.
Yeah, that's great advice. Asking how and what questions. Do you ever get a property under contract without looking at it?
We have a few. Yeah,
Okay.
it's at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, and we know that
Mhm.
our premium buyers are going to buy it no more than this, no matter what the inside's like, because they're going to
Okay.
turnkey it.
And you've negotiated quite our deals where we come to the number over the phone, but we don't actually get in our contract oftentimes until we actually go out there. But we know
Okay.
the price oftentimes before we even go to a property visit. Not always, but oftentimes.
Yeah, this is actually even just really good advice for me to hear you talking about that from working backwards, right? Like go to my best buyers and for the people listening who want to get into wholesaling, like reverse engineering, and that will help like no matter the property condition, right? No matter even if it's horrible, like that it's going to work. That's really smart, even for me to hear that. So thanks for sharing that. So that's one way that you get deals is, list skip tracing. What are other ways that you get deals? Like, do you send postcards? Is that a thing that you do?
We have done a few mailing campaigns, not too often. We've only probably sent 2,000, 3,000 mailers, a couple of rounds, but that's probably about it.
Okay. And did anything come from it?
We've got about, I'd say 10 to 20, 10 to 20 leads from that list that we're still kind of nurturing. A couple of sellers have more than one property, so which also helps the contract number. Instead of having just one-on-one, you get 1 on 10.
Yeah, when it comes to marketing, you really want to think about it as casting a net. And so we do both online, and which is often inbound marketing, and then we do a lot of outbound marketing. And me and Cody really can't move the needle very much on the inbound. We've hired a service, they're doing the work, and we just wait for the phone to ring. So we spend the rest of our time kind of trying to drum up business. And so we're doing experiments. Does texting work better? Does phone calling work better? And this is constantly changing. And so right now we're doing some tests to see if, on these lists of people that are hard to get a hold of, maybe just do some mailing campaigns. We also do bandit signs. And like today, we closed on a deal that came from a bandit sign that was called in January. And so 8 or 9 months ago that we've been nurturing the sales guys, not me, the sales guys have been nurturing this all this time. And then we got an assignment fee today because we did this little experiment with bandit signs to see if they're effective. Well, okay, they're effective enough. Maybe we should be doing some more.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's really motivating too. Like, I like the way that you said that with a net and then experimenting. A lot of people would put up bandit signs and I think like get nothing from it, for 2 months and then give up on it. But I guess you got a deal. What is it now? 8 or 9 months later?
8 or 9 months later, the return on your marketing, especially for these like guerrilla style marketing efforts, can be really long. 3 to 6 months out there, because right now going and finding that motivated seller that says, "Yep, I'll just give you my house," is hard to come by. And so because it's a very competitive market. So you really have to like go and find people who have a property and they haven't told anybody. They may not even know themselves if they're ready to sell that property. You need to go find those people. And how do you do that? It's brute force. You call them and text them like crazy and say, hey, you want to sell your house? And we recycle that list periodically and go back and say, okay, well, we've been through all of these houses in this zip code. Maybe it's time to come back through and see if we can find these people again, because sometimes they don't answer the phone. They said, no, not right now. Well, we're going to come back to them 6 to 12 months later.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's, like you said, the follow-up part of it is a huge deal. I mean, I read a stat recently that like 80% of sales are made after the 5th touch, I think is what they said. So that's super, super important. So are we missing anything here as far as the outbound side of sales? Like, are you doing anything else? You got lists. We talked a little bit about postcards, bandit signs. Are there other ways you guys are trying to find deals?
I think we've missed the most important one. The one that we all should be doing is networking. And we had a conversation me, Cody, and Chris just had a conversation this past week saying, you know what, we've made a lot of progress in some of these other things, but we've kind of forgotten about some of the fundamentals that we've done before. And we're trying to remind ourselves, okay, why are we not sending an email to all the realtors that we know saying, hey, I need to buy a house by the end of this month. You got anything ready? Are there any pocket listings? Or talking to other real estate agents, mortgage brokers, professionals in the industry, real estate attorneys. There's a lot of people out there that only do deals via networking. Before I joined forces with Chris and Cody, I was just kind of resting on my laurels and I was letting my network bring me deals. And I've kind of stepped away from that, and I've noticed I'm not getting as much because I'm not going out and asking.
That is huge advice. Yes, because we actually saw that in our business too. Josh and I, we had a conversation recently about me going out and doing more networking. And anyways, I just posted on Facebook maybe a week ago saying, hey, I'm trying to connect with more people in the county over. I had a lunch today with a guy from my Facebook status. And anyways, he sent me a deal. So, I mean, I don't know if we're going to do the deal or not. It's so new. But anyways, I just got a coffee with him and he sent me over a deal that kind of hits our criteria. So great advice to go out and network. So if you're listening to this, go network with somebody like right now, because I think that's huge. Okay. So I also want to talk about, so you guys, you're doing all this stuff, you're networking, you got the inbound side of things with a website covered. Can you talk maybe about a couple of deals that you've done that are just like, maybe a couple things we could talk about, like a creative deal that you've done, a home run deal that was just like, wow, like I can't believe that this is such a great deal, If we could talk about a couple of those, that'd be awesome.
Okay, I'll let Cody talk about the juicy deal and I'll talk about the creative deal. So let's start off first by reminding the audience of our philosophy. And our philosophy is that there's always somebody making money in real estate in any market cycle. You just have to adjust to the market. Don't try and force something that isn't there. So what we're doing is we read the market. And right now we're noticing that there are a lot of out-of-state buyers looking for a place to invest in the Southeast and Midwest. So we're tailoring our marketing towards the buy box that Cody was talking about before, those criteria. So that's what we're focusing on now. And we're starting to kind of grow that business based on what's happened in the last couple of months. But prior to that wasn't happening as much in our market. But what was happening, what was available was there are people who had a shortage of housing. And so we were coming across a whole bunch of really low income beat up properties. And we didn't want to hold those as rentals. We've kind of have a rental portfolio and we pick some off here and there. But what we wanted to do is figure out a way to monetize these deals in a way that wasn't a lot of burden on us as managers. So what we were doing previously, and we're still doing this a little bit, but this is the market cycle today is different than it was 6 months ago. And so, 6 months ago, we were actively finding deals that were low income. And what we would do is we would find those and take it down with somebody else's IRA. So let's say Austin, you're fairly young, so you probably don't have an IRA with $100,000 in it. But let's say your dad does, and your dad has an IRA, and he wants to get into investing, but he doesn't know how to do it. You say, you know what, Austin's dad, I will allow your IRA to take down one of these properties. So his IRA holds title to the property, and then me and Cody will market this property and sell it to an owner occupant via owner financing. And then we sell the property after your dad's IRA takes title to an owner occupant. And we say we buy it for $50,000, we sell it to the owner occupant for $100,000 at 10% interest with a $800 a month payment. And your dad's IRA gets 10% return for the next 10 years. Would that be something your dad might be interested in? A 10% return for the next 10 years and does nothing but to cash checks.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's secured.
And it's secured by a property. So if something does, and if that property is not paid for, then we can take it back. So we've turned that property into a note, and the quality of the occupant in this low income area who is a homeowner is potentially quite a bit higher than you might get from a renter. And then they're responsible for taxes and insurance and repairs. And we're only responsible for any kind of debt service or just keeping track of the payments. In this case, there's not really debt service. We have a partner payment to your dad's IRA.
Okay. So I want to just track with that so I understand. So basically, keep using my dad as an example. You take his IRA, he gets the home in his name, correct?
His IRA's name.
Oh, his IRA's name. Okay. And then you're going to sell it to an owner occupant and then pay my dad's IRA 10%.
Correct.
Over 10 years.
Right. And Chris and Cody get what's left. So let's say I pay your dad, let's see, $400 per month, and we keep the other $400 that's from the $800 payment.
Okay, that makes total sense. So it's a pure cash flow game then.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And there's no debt. And so could one of your listeners do that in today's market still? Absolutely. Because they might be young, they may not have a lot of their own capital, but all they got to do is find a deal that is, sub $50,000 if you happen to live in a market, or you can operate in a market that has rental grade properties, Class C or lower, that you can buy for $50,000 or less. You can turn around and sell those properties for a multiple, sometimes of two, maybe just 2/3, but you can sell that property for $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 at 10% interest to the underlying resident, and they're happy to pay 9-10% interest because they can't get qualified for a loan otherwise.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome the way that you guys figured that out. So do you have a lot of people who are doing that currently then?
Yeah, I'd probably say my children's IRAs are doing that. So my children's IRAs don't have a lot of money in them, right? But they do have a few $100s. And those, my kids' IRAs will then invest and buy, 1/100th of a property, but your dad's IRA will go in and buy the majority of it for, $50,000. And my son's IRA will put in $100 because he only has $500 in there anyway. But then now he's going to start getting $400 of payments once we sell it to an owner occupant.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I bet you there are a decent amount of people who are listening to this have never heard of that or even thought you could do that. So that's awesome. Do you have information about that, like on your website?
I do have articles, or I have episodes of my podcast that you can listen to that talk about it. And it's called the Impact Investing Model.
Okay, the Impact Investing Model. So I'll make sure I get after we're done, put that in the show notes, because I'm sure there are people who are like, wait, I have some money in my IRA that I'd want to invest, and I didn't know you could do that. So that's awesome. Okay, so we just talked about, kind of creative way to do deals. Cody, can you tell us about a home run that you guys have hit?
Yeah, since we do a lot of wholesale, we get first looks at all the deals that come across. So that means that we can cherry pick some and stay in, or we can wholesale out and get a fee. And so on particular deals that come in, if we don't get a certain type of fee, like if we can't make $10,000 minimum on a fee, we may just keep it ourselves. But if we can push it, we can. So one deal we got where we wanted to stay in, and we ended up getting it for $80,000, and we're going to borrow money. And this is actually going to be a house hack for us. So this is Birchwood, Paul. And what we're going to do is do the same thing that Paul's talking about. We're going to borrow enough money to buy the house and put $20,000 worth of work into it to redo the kitchen and the bathroom, and then refinance out their capital into long-term debt. And so Chris and I would have no money into it, but now we have a fully, almost redone property on the inside, new kitchen, new bathrooms, etc. And we have equity in the deal with zero money in.
So are you guys actually going to move in it, you're saying, like yourselves?
Yeah, we're going to move in it ourselves and get a roommate or Airbnb out the other 2 rooms to help pay for the note. But the play here is, Chris and I are only 26. We don't have, first off, we don't have a full-time job. So we're not bankable. And therefore, we have to think creatively and go outside the traditional bank loan. And so where we're going is to somebody's IRA, and they're lending us, $100,000, $80,000 for the purchase and $20,000 for the rehab. And that allows us enough money to get into it with nothing out of our pockets, but we still maintain an equity position when it's all said and done. So, most of the mom and pop retail owners, they pay full price. So for this house that we're buying for $80,000, that mom and pop is paying $110,000, $120,000 for it. We're buying it for $80,000, getting a new kitchen, a new bathroom, and not putting any money into it. That same mom and pop buying it for $110,000, $120,000, they're putting down a down payment.
So you're getting somebody who's going to give you money through their IRA, and then while you guys are rehabbing it, before you refinance it, you're going to pay them monthly, right? Is that kind of how it works then? You're going to pay them a 10% monthly fee until you refinance it?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So we're paying them 10% interest only, and that benefits the lender too, because there's no principal being reduced. So he doesn't care how long it goes, since it's interest only. But we would have a 12-month kind of contract with them to where we would refinance or reevaluate in 12 months, but in hopes we would refinance him out within 6 months because we are paying a higher, interest rate just to get in.
So you're paying 10% and then you would refinance into like a 3% or something interest rate mortgage.
Just a traditional, either a hard money loan, or just a long-term, commercial loan.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. So, because I've actually been thinking about doing something like that for myself and my wife, because I love the term you said, bankable, right? Like you're not bankable because you quit your job, you're doing this. I'm in the same boat, right? It's like we've house hacked a couple times. And so that was good for me to hear too, because maybe I can get my dad's IRA or something and try to work it out and pay him interest. That's awesome. So, this has been super helpful for me. Okay. So how can people get in touch with you guys? Someone listens to this, what should they do to get in touch?
Cody, go ahead.
Yeah. So you can follow me on social media, really. Instagram is where I primarily hang out, and it's at Cody.Dover. So just my first with a period in the middle of my last name. And you can follow me on there and then DM me and let me know that you came from this podcast. I would love to answer anything that you have, or maybe guide you in the right direction if you are lost.
Perfect. And then if you are interested in the podcast that we run or anything that we're doing from the business side of things, you can text the word investor to the number 33777, and we will give you a free guide on how to create offers using a 3-option letter of intent, which is our kind of philosophic strategy, which we didn't get into very much today, but it is covered in my BiggerPockets podcast, and I'll actually break it down exactly how to do that if you text the word investor to the number 33777.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, super cool. I think that's a really valuable resource there. So definitely do that if you're listening to this and you're interested at all. And like Cody said, if you DM him, tell him you came from this podcast, because I think he said he was going to pay me a referral fee. So I can't remember what we said at the beginning, but I'm pretty sure he said he was going to pay me. So yeah, just go ahead and hit him up on Instagram. But I'm just kidding. Anyways, well, guys, this was a great episode. I mean, it was great for me to even just hear how you guys are getting properties, as more than just the inbound marketing, the actual outbound stuff. So super valuable for me. I'm sure it was super valuable for our listeners. So thanks so much for coming on, and I guess we'll just catch you guys later.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Marketing Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. We'll see you later.